Well, hello and welcome to Politics Today, coming to you live from Channels Television's global headquarters here in Lagos, Nigeria. I'm Kayode Okikelu. Tonight, we're nearing the end of our countdown. We're now 1 day away from the deadline which the Constitution has set for President Muhammadu Buhari to sign or not to sign the Electoral Bill into law. The National Assembly transmitted it to him on November the 19th, and the Nigerian Constitution demands that the President sign any bill transmitted to him within 30 days. Well, the options before the President are to either sign the bill or return it to the National Assembly, and the National Assembly can then choose to veto the President or reintroduce the bill for another round of legislative process. But why is this bill important, you might ask? Well, this is a document that is expected to smoothen our election process and also introduce the use of technology for the conduct of our electioneering process. And with the President's promise to bequeath to Nigerians an improved electoral process, you can imagine why all eyes are on this one. Well, the Attorney General has advised the President, but we're yet to know what his decision is. So we have 1 day to find out. Meanwhile, President Muhammadu Buhari is in Turkey for the Turkey-Africa Summit, where he met with the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. And top on the agenda of that meeting was security and defense, as President Buhari acknowledged that Turkey had garnered a lot of experience dealing with security challenges of various kinds, and Nigeria will latch on to that experience in dealing with its current security challenges. And given assurances that the relationship between the two states will continue to grow for the mutual benefits of both countries, President Buhari said he was pleased with the Turkish offer of support in the area of security and peace. Well, on his part, the Turkish leader who had visited Nigeria just 2 months ago said he was happy to receive President Buhari, and he promised to assist Nigeria in the areas of defense and health, among others. He also noted that discussions are ongoing on how to strengthen the capacity of the Defense Industries Corporation, that's DICON, in Kaduna. But it wasn't all bilateral meetings alone for the president today, who turned 79. He got a surprise from the Nigerian delegation as he stepped out of his suit with a cake and a happy birthday chorus to go along with it. And there you see one of the cakes just designed in the colors of Nigeria, green and white. Well, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, who spoke on behalf of the delegation, and the Ambassador of Nigeria to Turkey, Ismail Yusuf Abba, congratulated the president and wished him a happy birthday. And in response, the president said he will put in his best for Nigeria until the last day in 2023, when he will hand over to a successor and return to his farm. Well, again, happy birthday to the president. Back home in Nigeria, we have other top political stories for you. Here's our political roundup.
As the fear of a possible fuel scarcity heightens ahead of the Yuletide celebration, the Abuja Zonal Office of the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority has launched a monitoring operation in the nation's capital to ensure marketers are not hoarding the product. The authority says Nigerians need not worry and engage in panic buying, as there is enough supply of petrol for the period.
We want to ensure sufficiency of products. Any filling station that is hoarding will be penalized.
This insecurity.
Taraba State Governor Darius Ishaku has raised an alarm over plots by ISWAP and Boko Haram to establish camps in his state. While threatening to dethrone any traditional ruler who adds or harbor criminals in the state, the governor also enjoined them not to allow non-indigents with negative mindsets to settle in the state. He was speaking when he signed the 2022 budget into law at the executive chamber of the government house.
Any leader must be sensitive to make sure that if we can do away with one person and save 1,000 lives, it's much better for all of us.
Youth in Delta State have been making remarkable difference in the economic development of communities in the state and country. And this statement is attributed to the Delta State Governor Ifeanyi Okowa during the flag-off of the second cycle of the Rural Youth Skill Acquisition Program held at the National Youth Service Corps Permanent Orientation Camp in Anyocha North Local Government Area of the state.
With his address of welcome.
This time, over 800 participants were selected for this cycle, predicated on the principle of geographical spread, with 3 youths emerging from each of the 270 electoral wards in the state.
We are achieving our goal of producing leaders and managers that have high levels of personal responsibility and personal effectiveness.
Bauchi State Governor Bala Mohammed wants the newly posted Commissioner of Police to the state, Umar Sanda, not to compromise issues of security, but discharge his assignment with professionalism and free from undue influence. He mentioned this to the new police commissioner when they received him on a courtesy visit at Government House, Bauchi. Governor Mohammed promised to be accessible and says he welcomes strengthened partnership with the police that will lead to enhanced security in the state.
We are always looking forward to a police officer that will imbibe that culture of professionalism and impartiality.
So what's the big issue tonight? Well, while the president is in Turkey to get support in the area of security for one, we take a look at how much work this government has on its hand in that area of security and defense. And I'm talking terrorism, banditry, kidnapping, and other violent crimes which are peculiar to, states, sub-regions, and regions in the country. So tonight, we zoom in on those issues. And before we get into that, I'd like you to listen to the Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives, Honorable Idris Wase, who spoke recently on another area of this fight against, banditry and kidnapping. And he had this revelation to make, which will also be a major part of our conversation tonight. Take a listen.
There is a case in point that one of my nephews who is working in Kaduna that was taken by bandits to far away Binungwari. The combined forces of the Air Force went there and rescued him. They were able to arrest. Among the people that did that dastardly act was a member of his own house help. Mr. Speaker, I'm telling you for free, the police released all those who were found that were arrested in that. In Kaduna, of 2 police officers trending on our own who were dismissed because they came here to Nasarawa and arrested armed robbers. They were offered 8 million naira to release. They refused by their colleagues. The vehicles were recovered, and because of that act, again, Mr. Speaker, I am telling you, these 2 officers have been dismissed from service. You don't hear conviction, yet there will be arrest. There will be parade of those who are criminals. What happened to them? There is not even attempt to take them to court of law. I think some people owe some heads have to roll. If only we must make Nigeria peaceful and a good place for us to live.
So that's the Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives, Honorable Idris Wase, speaking there on the floor of the House. And he says he thinks some heads have to roll. So, to what extent is this compromise on the path of security agents? What do we need to do in the theater itself in terms of operations? A lot of issues to take a look at tonight, but we'll take this time out and we'll be back in a moment. Please stay with us. Welcome back. So let's get into our conversation tonight concerning security in Nigeria. Don't forget the president is in Turkey, and part of the discussions ongoing concerns security. So what are the areas we need to work on? What are the areas we should be focusing on when we're trying to get all the help, bilateral collaborations, and the rest? And to discuss this with us on the program tonight, we're joined by Dr. Kabir Adamu, who's a security consultant and the CEO, Beacon Consulting. He joins us via Zoom on the program. Dr. Adamu, thank you for joining us on the program indeed. Well, let me begin with what we heard the Deputy Speaker of the House say on the floor of the House of Representatives recently, and that was, it pointed to some sort of connivance, compromise on the path of security agencies. I know we always talk about the other areas, but I'd like us to begin from this one. Just how big an issue is this? I know we always talk about the other areas, but also begin from this one. Just how big an issue is this?
Okay, Kayode, I couldn't hear the beginning of your question, but I had the last part, which is the allegation by the Deputy Speaker regarding the, as it were, connivance between police and criminal elements. Now, interestingly, the Kaduna State Police Command released a rejoinder, as it were, and denied all the allegations leveled against it by the Deputy Speaker. So frankly, the issue is out there. It kind of depends on who you want to go with. But then as someone who is in the industry and who has been practicing for quite a while, unfortunately, this is not new. I want to take you back to the kidnap incident that happened in the University of Abuja. That incident too, unfortunately, we had from the security sources within the University of Abuja that it appeared before that particular incident, they had handed over certain suspects to the police, and that those suspects were eventually released by the police. So those types of allegations, unfortunately, are there. And coming from such a very high quarters as the Deputy Speaker, I believe that the police should look into it, identify if at all it's true, identify who is responsible, and then take necessary action. If it's a systematic issue that has to do with individuals within the system, then that must be corrected as well. If it's a case of one or two persons who are flouting the law, then I think it must be corrected immediately. But suffice to say, unfortunately, that type of allegation is quite common within the police.
Dr. Adamu, how hard is it to resolve this? Because you would expect that security agencies, they're meant to be the standard, as it were, because they essentially are meant to uphold the law. They are law enforcers. So they should be the standard. So how hard, because the Deputy Speaker was saying heads have to roll. And for the Deputy Speaker to say heads have to roll, you wonder who is meant to take on that task of making the heads roll. So if heads would roll, who should take on that task? The heads roll.
It should be the responsibility of, as it were, the police itself should be, concerned about such a weighty allegation coming from the number 5 person in terms of protocol, or number 6 in the country. And on the floor of the House, the police should be very concerned. Then we have the Minister of Police Affairs. We also have the Police Service Commission that has responsibility for certain administrative issues within the police. Then beyond that, I believe that the National Assembly too, as an institution, should have some elements of responsibility. There are committees that have oversight from capacity and capability over the police. So they too should be able to look at such issues. But beyond that, I think as a country, the role of the police is too important to be allowed to be ridiculed in this manner. And so once these types of things come up, we should not allow it just go like that. All of these institutions that I mentioned should take responsibility. And then, of course, the Inspector General of Police, who is the highest ranking police officer, should be accountable at the end of the day. The Deputy Speaker is there. He made those allegations. He mentioned names. So I think we have enough to start an investigation going. The worry is that this is a perception among a majority of Nigerians. if you recall, when there was this measure of corruption among public institutions, I think the last one, the police came out either as number 3. Before then, the police came out as number 2. So unfortunately, this issue has been there. It's a long-running issue. And I think we have an opportunity now to address it, given the fact that this has come up on the floor of the House and it's received enormous publicity by both the mainstream media as well as social media. So we're hoping that the various departments that I mentioned would take up that challenge, investigate the matter, and if there are facts behind the allegation, then of course they should do the right thing. If not, then the deputy speaker that made that allegation should be held responsible too for, as it were, making false allegations.
It's interesting, Dr. Adamu. You've said more than 2 things. You've talked about an investigation which should be conducted. You also referenced the statement by the Kaduna police regarding this one. So as it stands, this is still some sort of allegation that needs to be investigated. But you also said if it's not true, then the deputy speaker should, of course, take responsibility and perhaps withdraw that. But in terms of the investigation side now, this is your field, so you've seen these things time and again. How difficult is this task? You're talking about, I don't know, is it the police investigating itself, looking inwards? We've heard this time and again. In fact, we're recovering sort of from one, but this one we had to get a judicial panel of inquiry to look into that one. So for this one you refer to, how difficult a task is it?
Unfortunately, a little bit difficult because of our history. In terms of the facts that are available, not difficult, really. All it takes is the political will, for instance, to launch an investigation. And I made reference to the fact that it affects the integrity of a very key institution within our national security architecture, and that is the police. And so that means all the players within that sector should be very, very mindful of the significance of not investigating such a weighty allegation. But then because over time in our history, we have allowed, this culture of lack of accountability, unfortunately, to creep in. I wouldn't be surprised if this also goes by without any, investigation into it. Like I said, the Kaduna State Police Command has released a report, and most times that is where it ends. In the report, they indicated that there is no fact behind the allegation by the deputy speaker, and that they are not, privy to any information suggesting that he has handed over anyone to them. Meanwhile, he has indicated in his statement that even the governor of the state was aware of the fact. So again, there are enough facts to commence an investigation. All it takes is, the political will among these various institutions that I mentioned, the Minister of Police Affairs, the Police Service Commission, the Office of the Inspector General of Police, and then the presidency too can come in. Once there's that political will, it's very easy given the facts that are available on ground. But like I said, unfortunately, that culture is already within us. And except if, we reverse that, I do not expect that anything would come out of this, unfortunately.
Yeah, we certainly hope this will be different. But so that's in Kaduna State and in neighboring Katsina, because this conversation essentially focuses on, that region, the sub-region of the northwestern sub-region of the country. And just recently, the governor of this state visited the president, where he, spoke about that sad killing of a commissioner in the state. And he also, afterwards spoke about something that is quite controversial, and I'd like to get your views on this one. And it talked about, getting people to bear arms, as it were. And according to him, he says, if the criminals, have that, the audacity to bear arms freely, in quotes, why not give the people, some lawful means to be able to acquire arms? I know we can reference what's happening in the United States and in other climes, but Nigeria's case is peculiar, and you probably have had to speak to this one. But regarding the governor of Katsina State, the peculiar situation he's in and the sub-region is in, would you say that's the way to go?
So I would like to reference Mexico here. For a lot of reasons, the situation in Mexico is almost similar to what we're having in Nigeria, where gaps within the security architecture of the state has allowed non-state actors, in the case of Mexico, drug warlords, to control certain segments of the state. And they are perpetrating, to an extent, the kind of banditry that we're seeing in Nigeria. And so what has evolved almost naturally is self-help militias that are protecting, units of the communities. And so I am of the opinion, and based on my studies, that if we do not address quickly the situation we have in Nigeria, then we're going to have the Mexico-like situation where self-help groups will emerge, and these self-help groups will arm themselves to protect communities. We're already seeing that in the Southwest. Amotekun has come up, but of course with the backing of state laws. The South is already discussing its own security arrangement. Of course, in the North, you've got this state-level arrangements that are not very coordinated. So as we progress in terms of all of these security challenges, I think whether the governor calls for it or not, it will be a natural development. As human beings, nobody's going to allow himself to be killed. At some point, you would seek to protect yourself. The call by the governor is instrumental in the sense that instead of allowing this natural sort of development, which in the long run may not augur well for our society, perhaps it's best that government takes charge and responsibility and perhaps begin discussion around the decentralization of our security architecture. Despite all the challenges that may come with the decentralization, I think if we do it ourselves and put in place measures to check whatever disadvantages that may come out of it, it would be best for us than if we allow this natural sort of development that I mentioned to happen.
A few things here, Dr. Adamu. The self-help, which you referenced, was essentially people, going out of the law to procure these things, to get these arms outside of the law. So that's essentially self-help. But you also reference decentralizing it. So that's essentially tweaking our laws to allow, I imagine, states, sub-regions, sub-nationals, as it were, to have some sort of, decision-making ability when it comes to arm bearing. And there's another level, which is having the law back individuals to own arms. Now, this is not, like the arrangement of the Amotekun and the rest. This is for individuals. So which one are you referencing as the way forward? Is it for individuals to be able to acquire these arms? Of course, that will need the laws to change. Or for sub-nationals to have, to be empowered to be able to make decisions regarding that?
Okay, I am of the view that the sub-nationals should have some level of, involvement within the security architecture. I do not think our development has reached that stage where individuals should own weapons beyond what they can own right now. Let's not forget that, individuals based on the Weapons Act can own pump-action rifles. But anything beyond that, I do not think we've reached that stage yet. For a lot of reasons, the type of disharmony that exists within us, the types of ethnic profiling, hate messaging and all that exists within us, unfortunately, if we allow that, I think it would create more challenges. But at the subnational level, where you expect some level of checks and balances, then I think it would be hopefully able to block some of the vulnerabilities that exist within our national security architecture at the moment.
To be fair with you, and I know that you probably see this as well, I mean, these laws, these talks might not happen in the next 5 years or 10 years. It might take a long time or might not even happen. So shouldn't we also be focusing on probing properly how these, non-state actors get access to arms? I mean, these things are not sold in the open market freely, and they are expensive, by the way. So how do they get access? Shouldn't we be also talking about that?
Yeah, so I recently did a study on that in particular, and it was quite mind-boggling, the revelation from that. In other words, what we found out that the majority of the weapons were coming from across the border, mainly from Libya, from Mali, and then interestingly, which shocked us, from our own security agencies, the armory of our security agencies, the integrity of those armories are not, they're not very good. And so it's very easy for non-state actors to raid our security formations, invade the armories, steal from the armories. And then the second part of that is the corrupt individuals within the security architecture that sell these weapons, or sometimes for hire, to the security agencies. And then lastly, there is a local manufacturing industry for some of these weapons, including the AK-47 and AK-49. So it's a combination of all of these factors that unfortunately allow these non-state actors to have access to weapons. But the more interesting fact is even the numbers. We came up with the number of roughly about 6.5 million small arms and light weapons in circulation in the country. And when we tried to identify the number of law enforcement agents that were legally, constitutionally allowed to bear weapons, the figure came to about 700,000, thereabout. And then we now tried to get the number of licenses that has been issued by the Inspector General of Police. Now, all of that came to about 1.7 million. So if you remove that from the 6.5 million, it means roughly there are about 4.7 to 4.8 million small arms and light weapons in the hands of non-state actors, including state-level security arrangement. Compare that with the 1.7 that are in the hands of licensed officials. That is the enormity of our challenge in the country that we are not dealing with at the moment. I must mention that the president has appointed someone, as it were, to mop up these small arms and light weapons. He's also submitted a bill to the National Assembly, but that bill is yet to be passed by the National Assembly for the creation of a commission for the mopping up of these small arms and light weapons. So it's a huge challenge that, unfortunately, we are yet to contend with in the country. And it's one of the major drivers of the security challenge that we have in the country at the moment.
Oh, well, Dr. Kabir Adamu, it's been quite enlightening speaking with you on this one, as always. I would like to thank you very much for joining us on the program and sharing your thoughts and data, because that's always very vital to this discussion. Thank you so much. Dr. Kabir Adamu is a security consultant and CEO, Beacon Consulting. Thank you again. To this discussion, thank you so much. Dr. Kabir Adamu is a security consultant and CEO, Beacon Consulting. Okay, we'll go on a break now. And when we return, we'll turn our attention to another issue, which is also important. We're in the final moments of the 30-day deadline, which the president has to sign or not to sign the electoral bill. What's the way forward? What are the options? We'll find out in a moment. Please stay with us. So that's our next discussion. It's a big one, really, because it affects, Nigeria as a whole, every nook and cranny of the country. And this evening, to take a look at this, we're in the dying moments of that 30-day period, which the president has to sign or not to sign the electoral bill. We're joined by Mr. Ezewa Wago, who's an election monitor. He joins us via Zoom, as well as Mr. Samson Itodo, who's Executive Director of Yaga Africa. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on the program this evening to discuss this very important topic that concerns the bedrock, some will say, of democracy. So the president is yet to, officially let Nigerians know what his decision on that bill is. So for you, what do you sense? Do you sense a reluctance? Do you sense perhaps a due process? Or this is all just normal?
Well, thank you very much, and good evening, everyone. First, is unfortunate that we are at this particular point in the electoral reform process. Even though the president is still within the constitutional time frame for assenting or declining assent to a particular piece of legislation, but it's sad that for a process that began about 2 years ago, for a process that enjoyed multi-stakeholder engagement, both from the Ministry of Justice, INEC, civil society, and the National Assembly, it's rather unfortunate that at this moment, Nigerians do not know where the president stands, and there's uncertainty as to the passage or the assent of the electoral amendment. There are 3 key issues that we must note. Now, one, the current piece of legislation before the president is a reflection of the will and aspiration of the Nigerian people. And we expect that the president would have made do his promise of bequeathing to Nigerians a legal framework that not only guarantees the sanctity of the ballot, but also defends the independence of our institution. Second is the fact that this particular process is coming at a critical juncture where the legal framework for off-cycle elections and the general elections ought to have been concluded just to fast-track the process of preparation. In less than 3 weeks, the primaries for the Ekiti governorship elections will commence on the 4th of January. The primaries for the Osun governorship elections will commence in February. And we've got FCT elections on February 12th. Now, this new electoral act should have, guided the conduct of these elections, because there are new innovations in the amendment process. So the entire planning, for these elections and the general elections is dwarfed by the delays in the passage of this legislation. The last critical point is the fact that it is worrisome that at this material time, when the National Assembly is considering the appropriation bill for 2022, the legal framework is yet to be concluded, and the National Assembly is going to pass the 2022 appropriation bill on Tuesday. So what will now be the basis, for the elections budget? Because the provisions in the Electoral Act have the Electoral Bill have grave implications, for the 2022 budget. So it's just a cloud of uncertainty that is avoidable, but it's just sad that we have subjected, a fantastic piece of legislation to partisan politics. And we have traded, based on our observation, we've traded, public interest with partisan interest. And I hope that, the president, yes, he still has up to think that his communication to the National Assembly is an assent to this legislation, because any delay, if he declines or he calls for a reconsideration, it means we will have to wait until 2022 to conclude the amendment process. And that will not bode well, for the 2023 elections.
So just before I take Mr. Wago's opening comments, let's just bring you a news just in. Well, Canada has lifted the travel restriction which it placed on Nigeria and 9 other African countries with effect from midnight on Saturday. The restriction was imposed to curb the spread of the COVID-19 Omicron variant into the country. Well, other African nations affected are South Africa, Mozambique, Botswana, Zimbabwe, Lesotho, Eswatini, Namibia, Malawi, and Egypt. Again, Canada has lifted the travel restriction which it placed on Nigeria and 9 other African countries with effect from midnight on Saturday. So that's news just in. Let's return to our conversation. Well, Mr. Wagu, thank you for staying with us as well. And I wonder what your thoughts are really, because some would say that you can tell what will happen based on what has happened. We've been here before in 2018, and I mean, we know what happened. That's why we are where we are today. So for you, seeing the trend of things, do you think we'll probably see a repeat of what happened in 2018, or we'll move forward?
Well, I think that the bigger challenge we have right now will be to begin to situate why, at this point in time, if the president was going to be assenting or refusing to assent, we are not able to get reasons why that has not happened just a day to go. I think that the push and pull from partisan interests have befuddled the ability of the president to take a decision that is ordinarily simple. It's simple because in the course of the engagement for this electoral bill amendments, we have thought that the office of the Attorney General and Minister of Justice will be embedded in the whole gamut of the process in such a way that when it gets to this point, the idea would have been that the T's will have been crossed and the I's dotted. But I think we just have to hold our breath and see what happens in the next 12 hours. This president has a responsibility to bequeath a legacy of transparent, credible, free, fair elections. And one of the ways that he can do that will be to be able to come out at every point in time, open straight up on where he stands on the issues that bother a lot of election and electoral integrity enthusiasts. So it's just unfortunate. It's something that is worrying and of very deep concern that we have to perhaps go the route that we went through the 8th Assembly again, and all the pitfalls that needed to have been foreclosed for us not to go through this path were already put out in the engagement for this electoral amendment bill. But let's keep our fingers crossed. If he doesn't assent, we will be able to see the reasons why he didn't assent and then examine them and then take it from there.
Do you think the president's trip to Turkey, because the president is in Turkey as I speak with you for the Turkey-Africa Summit, do you think his trip to Turkey will affect this? I mean, what do you think the implication of that trip will be on the signing or otherwise of this bill?
Well, what I just worry why it has to take this long. We know the president is not in the country. We know also that perhaps this should have happened. But when you have a minister and attorney general who is himself embedded in partisan politics, that is the challenge that you have. Because the issues that are perhaps holding down this law will have to do with the issue around whether we are going to have direct or indirect primaries. And that has pitched political actors in the political spectrum in different places. And lobbying the president at this time, when you now have the man who has to clearly explain to the president, I know that INEC has made his position very clear, and that position of INEC is in tandem with the position of the Nigerian people, which was canvassed during those bills. So what we need to do is to extricate politics from the reform process. If we are not able to do that, we will continue to go around in circles the way we have done with this. And it's unfortunate that the electoral amendment bill is the one that is always suffering this kind of hitch when it comes to presidential assent. But I just hope this National Assembly, if they are able to have the lever to override the president and then give the Nigerian people the law that they expect at this time.
Well, Mr. Etodo, this conversation, so Mr. Wagu has taken us further into the controversy about direct and indirect. He's also referenced the veto aspect. We'll get to that. But regarding the direct and indirect angle, the debate and the controversy we've seen, do you think this is big enough, this is monumental enough to cause the president to withhold his assent? The presidency has confirmed yet that the Attorney General has advised the president. So this debate, direct, indirect primaries within parties, is it big enough an issue to hold back the president's assent?
Well, I don't think it's big enough compared to the other amendments or the other innovations in the bill. But one of the key functions of political parties is candidate recruitment, and they approach the electoral reform as and the electoral law as their rules of professional conduct. And if you look at, most pre-election cases, the acrimonious nature of candidate selection raises the salience of that particular provision as to determining the mode of selection of candidates, because most political parties are simply involved in candidate recruitment. So for them, this is very crucial and it's very important. And all this is just the politics, of 2023 and how parties will determine who becomes their candidate. So for the parties, is a crucial amendment. But if you look at all the amendments, to a large extent, I don't think this is quite important and critical, to the integrity of elections management. But this relates to candidate selection, and it's part of the electoral cycle, a key activity within the electoral process. But I must say, whether direct or indirect primaries, none of these processes are insulated from manipulation. And so the president ought to have made up his mind as to where he wants to stand. And I want to say that if I were the president, and if the president would listen to Nigerian people, is to assent to the bill before him. And if there is need, for further amendments to provisions, then they can introduce a bill, to amend the section. We've done that before in 2010 when the electoral bill was passed. There was need 2 months later, to amend the Electoral Act in relation to voter registration. And a bill was sent to the National Assembly, and the National Assembly did amend, those provisions. So I think because of the expediency that this entire process requires, the president should go ahead, and assent to the bill. And in the event he doesn't assent to the bill, I hope the National Assembly will stand with the Nigerian people and veto the president.
And that is something we've heard time and again. But gentlemen, we're in our concluding moments. And let me just wind down first with Mr. Etodo. So if a president does not sign this bill into law, do you think that hinders or affects his promise to bequeath to Nigerians an improved electoral system or process when he leaves office? Would we still have time to come up with, perhaps an alteration or a correction, depending on what the issue will be, ahead of a 2023 election?
I think if the president declines assent, he'll be reneging on his commitments from the world go that he will bequeath to Nigerians an electoral process. I say this with all sense of responsibility, that given the engagement and the approach adopted by the National Assembly to get to this stage, all the stakeholders, including the Minister of Justice, was involved in this process. Civil society was involved. And so I see no reason why the president is delaying. And so if he declines assent to this bill in its current state, it negates and it's at variance with the commitment that he made. Because If this moves to 2022, it's going to affect election planning.
Right.
And when you undermine the Electoral Commission and its preparations for 2023, you are heading for a disaster if care is not taken. So I hope that he assents to it, and if he doesn't, the National Assembly should stand with the Nigerian people and veto the president. So,
Mr. Wagu, a concluding moment on this one. I mean, who knows? Maybe the president has, forwarded his response to the National Assembly already, or done something about it. We don't quite know just yet. But what's the way forward for you?
The way forward.
Please go on.
To push, ensure that the kind of electoral process that we want is given to Nigerian people. The bigger issue is that we're not going to make light of the fact that the political parties are not in the conversation for electoral integrity. They are more interested in this one that Samson is saying is not as, it may not be as key. The interest of the political parties is in the leadership, is in the candidate recruitment process. And so the challenge is what to do with the direct or indirect primaries. The lobby is intense. The chief executive of states are lobbying very intensely. Members of the National Assembly are also in the fight for their survival. But in all of this, the Nigerian people should take the issues that concern Nigerian people should take the place of primacy. And that's why we thought that the president would lean on the side of the Nigerian people.
Well, gentlemen, I must sincerely thank you for joining us on the program tonight to share your thoughts on the electoral bill. Mr. Ezewan Wagu, election monitor, and Mr. Samson Itodo, the executive director of Yaga Africa. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time.
Thank you.
Well, that's our program for tonight, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. We still have a day to go. We'll keep our eyes on that one and bring you the latest updates. I'm Kayadoki Kilu. Good night.